In the heart of a merciless Colorado blizzard, a family of 4 vanished without a trace. 25 years later, a discovery in the snow would unravel a mystery no one could have imagined. It was December 22, 1992, in the rugged mountains of Colorado. The Kessler family, Mark, 38, Laura, 36, their 12-year-old daughter Emily, and 8-year-old son Ethan, piled into their blue Ford Bronco, their hearts light with the promise of a Christmas ski trip. The plan was simple: drive from their home in Denver to a cozy lodge in Breckenridge, a 3-hour journey through winding mountain roads. They'd been planning this for months. Mark, a high school history teacher, had saved up for the trip, and Laura, a nurse, had taken extra shifts to buy new ski gear for the kids. Emily, with her boundless curiosity, had packed a notebook to sketch the snowy peaks, while Ethan, always the dreamer, clutched his favorite stuffed bear, whispering about building the biggest snowman ever. But the weather had other plans. That afternoon, meteorologists issued a warning. A record-breaking blizzard was barreling toward the Rockies. Winds up to 70 miles per hour, temperatures plunging to -20 Fahrenheit, and snow falling at 2 inches per hour. Most families canceled their plans, but Mark was stubborn. He'd checked the forecast, sure they could beat the storm. "We've driven these roads 100 times," he told Laura, his voice calm but firm. She hesitated, glancing at the darkening sky, but trusted him. They loaded the car, kissed their dog goodbye, and set off at 3 p.m., just as the first flakes began to fall. By 5 p.m., the storm was a monster. Visibility dropped to near zero, the windshield a blur of white. The Bronco's headlights barely pierced the swirling snow. Mark gripped the wheel, his knuckles white, while Laura whispered prayers in the passenger seat. In the back, Emily clutched her notebook, scribbling nervously, and Ethan hugged his bear, asking, "Are we there yet?" over and over. They were on Highway 9, a narrow stretch flanked by towering pines and steep drop-offs. The radio crackled, with static, warning drivers to stay off the roads. But Mark pressed on. At 6:17 p.m., a grainy call came through to the Summit County Sheriff's Office. It was Mark, his voice distorted by the storm's interference. "We're stuck. Snow's too deep, near mile marker 87. Please, we need help." The dispatcher tried to keep him on the line, but the call cut out. Rescue teams were mobilized, but the blizzard was relentless. Roads were closed, helicopters grounded. By the time a team reached mile marker 87 the next morning, the Bronco was gone. No tire tracks, no debris, no sign of the Kesslers. Just an endless sea of snow. For weeks, search parties scoured the area. Volunteers braved frostbite, combing the forests and ravines. Divers checked frozen lakes, and dogs sniffed for any trace. Nothing. The Kesslers had vanished, swallowed by the blizzard. Theories swirled. Had they slid off the road into a hidden crevasse? Been buried by an avalanche? Or, as some whispered, had they staged their own disappearance? Mark had been stressed about money, some said. Maybe they'd fled to start over. But Laura's sister, Karen, dismissed it. They were happy, she told reporters, tears freezing on her cheeks. They'd never leave their life behind. The case went cold. Years turned into decades. The Kessler file gathered dust in the sheriff's office, a grim reminder of nature's cruelty. By 2017, most had given up hope. The family was presumed dead, their story fading into local legend. But the mountains keep secrets, and some truths are buried deeper than others. In October 2017, a hunter named Tom Carver was trekking through the White River National Forest, 20 miles from where the Kesslers were last heard from. His dog, a scrappy mutt named Rusty, was sniffing the ground, chasing scents. The air was crisp, the first snow of the season dusting the pines. Rusty stopped at a clearing, pawing frantically at the frozen earth. Tom figured it was a buried bone or a dead squirrel, but when he knelt to look, his breath caught. There, half buried in the snow, was a tattered piece of fabric, A child's mitten, blue with red stars, caked in ice but eerily intact. Tom's hands trembled as he dug deeper. The mitten wasn't alone. Nearby he found a rusted thermos, a cracked flashlight, and something else, something that made him call the sheriff. It was a small, leather-bound notebook, its pages yellowed but preserved by the cold. On the cover, in faded marker, was a single word: Emily. The discovery sent shockwaves through Summit County. Was this the key to the Kessler mystery? The sheriff's office reopened the case, and forensic teams descended on the site. The notebook's pages were fragile but legible. Emily's childish handwriting filled them, sketches of mountains, notes about the trip, and then something chilling. Her final entry, dated December 22nd, 1992, read, "It's so cold. Dad says we have to leave the car. I'm scared. Someone's out there." Who was someone? Why had the family left their vehicle in a deadly storm? And how had these items survived 25 years in the wilderness, untouched by time? The answers were out there, buried in the snow, waiting to be uncovered. But what Tom's dog had found was only the beginning, a thread in a tapestry of secrets that would unravel everything we thought we knew about the Kessler's fate. A child's notebook, frozen in time, held clues to a 25-year-old mystery. But its final words hinted at something far darker than a storm. The discovery of Emily Kessler's notebook in 2017 was like a match struck in the dark. For 25 years, the Kessler family's disappearance had been a ghost story told around Colorado campfires. Now there was something tangible, proof that the family had been out there, in the frozen wilderness, and that something had gone terribly wrong. The Summit County Sheriff's Office, led by Sheriff Diane Holt, a no-nonsense veteran with a knack for cold cases, took charge. The notebook, thermos, flashlight, and mitten were sent to a forensic lab in Denver, while deputies cordoned off the clearing where Tom Carver's dog, Rusty, had made the find. The notebook was the centerpiece. Its leather cover was cracked, but the cold had preserved it remarkably well. Emily's handwriting was unmistakable, confirmed by her aunt, Karen, who broke down when shown a scan of the pages. "That's her," Karen whispered, tracing the faded ink. "That's my Emily." The early entries were innocent. Sketches of pine trees, notes about the ski trip, even a doodle of Ethan's stuffed bear. But as the pages progressed, the tone shifted. Emily wrote about the storm worsening, the car getting stuck, and her parents' growing panic. One entry, dated December 21st, 1992, read, "Mom keeps checking the map. Dad says we're fine, but his hands are shaking." Then came the final entry, the one that sent chills through everyone who read it. "It's so cold. Dad says we have to leave the car. I'm scared. Someone's out there." Those words raised more questions than answers. Why would Mark, a cautious father, abandon the safety of the Bronco in a blizzard? And who was someone? A rescuer? A stranger? Or something else entirely? Sheriff Holt wasn't one for wild theories, but even she admitted, this doesn't add up. The forensic team worked fast. The mitten, blue with red stars, was confirmed to be Ethan's, based on photos from the family's last Christmas. The thermos had traces of hot chocolate, and the flashlight's batteries were long dead, but its lens was cracked, as if dropped in a struggle. No DNA could be extracted from the items. 25 years of exposure had degraded any biological evidence, but the notebook's preservation was a miracle. The cold, dry conditions of the high Rockies had acted like a natural freezer, sealing the pages from decay. Investigators retraced the Kessler's route. Highway 9, where Mark's distress call had originated, was a treacherous stretch even in good weather. In 1992, it was a death trap. The mile marker 87 area was flanked by dense forest on one side and a 200-foot drop on the other. If the Bronco had gone off the road, it could have been buried under snowdrifts or swept away by an avalanche. But searches in '92 had found nothing, no metal, no wreckage. It was as if the car had vanished into thin air. Holt's team expanded. The search radius to the clearing where the notebook was found, 20 miles from mile marker 87. The distance was puzzling. Had the family walked that far in a blizzard? Or had the items been carried there by someone, or something else? The clearing itself was unremarkable, a flat patch surrounded by pines, but ground-penetrating radar revealed anomalies beneath. The soil. Deputies dug carefully, expecting bones or more belongings. Instead, they found something odd, a rusted metal box, about the size of a shoebox, buried 2 feet down. Inside the box was a collection of items that deepened the mystery. There was a woman's silver bracelet, engraved with the initials LK, Laura, Kessler, a folded map of Colorado, with a route marked in red ink, circling a remote cabin 15 miles from the clearing, and a single Polaroid photo, faded but clear enough to make out. Mark and Laura, smiling outside a cabin, with 2 shadowy figures in the background. The figures were too blurry to identify, but their presence was unsettling. Who were they? And why was this box buried in the middle of nowhere? Sheriff Holt contacted Karen, who confirmed the bracelet was Laura's, a gift from Mark on their 10th anniversary. But the map and photo were new. Karen had never heard of a cabin, and the Kesslers hadn't mentioned visiting one. The route on the map didn't match their planned trip to Breckenridge. It led to an area called Blackthorn Ridge, a remote, sparsely populated region known for its abandoned mining cabins. In 1992, it was barely accessible, especially in a blizzard. Holt's team tracked down the cabin from the Polaroid, still standing but dilapidated. Inside, they found signs of habitation from decades ago. Canned food, a wood stove, a tattered blanket. But there was something else, a child's drawing, pinned to the wall. It was a crude sketch of a family holding hands, with a 5th figure standing apart, drawn in black crayon. Emily's notebook had similar sketches, suggesting she'd been there. But why? Had the Kesslers sought shelter in the cabin? And who was the 5th figure? As investigators dug deeper, a local came forward with a story. In 1992, a reclusive hunter named Amos Reed lived near Blackthorn Ridge. He was known for avoiding people, living off the grid, and distrusting authorities. Some said he'd been seen near Highway 9 during the blizzard, his truck spotted by a stranded motorist. Could Amos have encountered the Kesslers? And if so, why hadn't he reported it? Holt decided to find Amos, now in his 70s, living in a trailer, outside Dillon. When questioned, he was cagey, claiming he didn't remember the blizzard, but his eyes darted nervously when shown the Polaroid. "Never seen that cabin," he muttered, but his hands shook as he handed it back. Holt didn't buy it. She left with a warning. "We'll be back, Amos." Back at the station, a new lead emerged. A forensic linguist analyzed Emily's notebook, noting that her final entry was written in a hurried, uneven scrawl, unlike her earlier neat handwriting. The linguist suggested stress or fear, but also something else. The phrase, "someone's," out there was written in a slightly different ink as if added later. Had Emily written it under duress, or had someone else tampered with the notebook? As the investigation deepened, one thing was clear. The Kesslers hadn't just vanished in the blizzard. Something, or someone, had drawn them into the heart of the storm, toward a cabin in Blackthorn Ridge, where secrets were waiting to be unearthed. A buried box and a cryptic photo pointed to a cabin lost in time. But the truth about the Kesslers was hiding in the shadows of Blackthorn Ridge. The investigation into the Kessler family's disappearance was no longer just a cold case. It was a puzzle with pieces that didn't fit. Sheriff Diane Holt and her team were now focused on Blackthorn Ridge, a desolate stretch of Colorado wilderness where the Kesslers' trail led. The map found in the buried metal box had circled a cabin, and the Polaroid photo of Mark and Laura, with 2 blurry figures in the background, suggested they'd been there. But why? And who were those figures? The child's drawing in the cabin, eerily similar to Emily's sketches, only deepened the mystery. Holt's team returned to the cabin, a ramshackle structure barely standing after decades of neglect. The interior was frozen in time. Dusty cans of beans, a rusted stove, a single chair tipped over in the corner. The drawing on the wall, 4 stick figures holding hands with a 5th in black crayon standing apart, felt like a silent scream. Forensic techs confirmed the paper matched Emily's notebook, down to the brand and texture. But the black crayon figure was drawn with heavier pressure, as if someone had pressed hard, almost angrily. Was it Emily's work, or someone else's? Investigators scoured the cabin for more clues. Under a loose floorboard, they found a small stash, a pocket knife with MK carved into the handle, Mark Kessler's initials, and a torn piece of fabric, blue denim, stained with what looked like dried blood. Lab tests later confirmed the blood was human, but too degraded for DNA analysis. The pocket knife was more telling. Karen, Laura's sister, recognized it as Mark's favorite, a gift from his father. "He never went anywhere without it," she said. The cabin's location was puzzling. Blackthorn Ridge was 15 miles from the clearing where Tom Carver's dog found Emily's notebook, and 20 miles from mile marker 87, where the Kessler's distress call originated. In a blizzard, with 2 young children, walking that far seemed impossible. Had someone transported them? The Bronco was still missing, and no tire tracks from 1992 had ever been found. Holt began to suspect the family had been lured or forced to the cabin. Attention turned back to Amos Reed, the reclusive hunter who'd lived near Blackthorn Ridge in 1992. Deputies interviewed locals who remembered him. One, a retired gas station clerk named Betty, recalled seeing Amos the day after the blizzard. "He came in for coffee, looking spooked," she said. "His truck was loaded with gear, blankets, shovels, like he was moving something heavy." When asked if he'd mentioned the Kesslers, Betty shook her head. Amos didn't talk much, but he kept looking over his shoulder, like someone was watching. Holt brought Amos in for questioning. This time he was more cooperative but still evasive. He admitted to owning a cabin near Blackthorn Ridge in the 90s, but claimed it was abandoned by the time of the blizzard. When shown the Polaroid, he froze. "That's not my cabin," he said, but his voice cracked. Holt pressed him about the blurry figures in the photo. "Just shadows," he mumbled, refusing to meet her eyes. She didn't have enough to hold him, but she placed a deputy to watch his trailer. Meanwhile, a new lead emerged from the forensic lab. The map found in the metal box had faint pencil markings, coordinates barely legible, pointing to a spot 500 yards from the cabin. Holt's team hiked to the location, a rocky outcrop overlooking a frozen creek. There, buried under a pile of stones, they found a plastic bag containing a single item. A child's stuffed bear, worn but intact, with a red ribbon around its neck. Karen confirmed it was Ethan's, the one he'd clutched during the drive. But the bear wasn't alone. Tucked inside its torn stitching was a folded note, in Emily's handwriting. "We're not alone. They're watching us." The note sent the investigation into overdrive. Who were they? The same someone from Emily's notebook? Holt began to suspect the Kesslers had encountered someone, or a group, in the wilderness. But who would be out in a blizzard, and why target a family? She dug into Blackthorn Ridge's history. In the 1980s, it had been a haven for drifters and survivalists, some with criminal records. Rumors persisted of a small commune that lived off the grid, shunning outsiders. Could the Kesslers have stumbled into their territory? A retired park ranger, Jim Dalton, came forward with a story. In 1992, he'd patrolled near Blackthorn Ridge and noticed strange activity. Campfires at night, voices in the woods, even footprints that vanished into the snow. "I thought it was kids or hunters," he said. "But one night, I saw lights in that cabin. I figured it was Amos, but when I checked, no one was there." Jim's logbooks from '92 confirmed his story. noting unexplained activity near the ridge. Holt's team searched the area around the creek where the bear was found. Ground-penetrating radar picked up another anomaly, a large rectangular shape buried deep. Excavation was slow, hampered by frozen soil, but what they uncovered made headlines. A rusted vehicle frame, partially crushed, with a faded blue paint job. It was the Kessler's Ford Bronco, buried under 10 feet of earth and snow. Inside were remnants of their belongings, a ski boot, a broken thermos, and a backpack with Emily's initials, but no bodies. The Bronco's discovery raised more questions. How had it ended up 20 miles from mile marker 87, buried so deep it evaded decades of searches? Had someone hidden it? And where were the Kesslers? The vehicle's frame showed signs of impact, but no blood or DNA. The gas tank was empty, suggesting it had been driven until it ran dry. Holt began to piece together a theory. The Kesslers had left the highway, reached the cabin, and encountered someone who didn't want them there. As the investigation closed in on Blackthorn Ridge, Amos Reed vanished. His trailer was empty, his truck gone. Deputies found a single item left behind, a black crayon, identical to the one used in the cabin's drawing. The mystery was tightening, but the truth was still out of reach, hidden in the snow and shadows of a place that refused to give up its secrets. A buried Bronco and a missing suspect pointed to a truth too grim to face. But the cabin in Blackthorn Ridge held ghosts that wouldn't stay silent. The discovery of the Kessler family's Ford Bronco, buried deep in Blackthorn Ridge, was a breakthrough that felt like a dead end. The vehicle was empty. No bodies, no clear evidence of what happened to Mark, Laura, Emily, or Ethan. Sheriff Diane Holt stood in the snow, staring at the rusted frame, her mind racing. The Bronco was 20 miles from where the Kesslers' distress. Call had been made in 1992. Someone had moved it, hidden it, and gone to great lengths to keep it that way. But who? And why were the family's belongings, Emily's notebook, Ethan's bear, Laura's bracelet, scattered across the wilderness like breadcrumbs? Holt's team doubled down on Blackthorn Ridge. The cabin, now a focal point, was searched again. This time they found a hidden trapdoor under the floorboards, leading to a small cellar. Inside was a chilling scene, a sleeping bag, a lantern, and a stack of old newspapers, all dated December 1992. One headline read, "Blizzard Traps Dozens," in Rockies, with a photo of stranded cars on Highway 9. Scrawled in the margin, in shaky handwriting, were the words, "They shouldn't have come here." The cellar suggested someone had been living in the cabin during the blizzard, possibly watching the Kesslers. Holt's suspicions returned to Amos Reed, the hunter who'd vanished after their last interview. Deputies tracked his truck to a junkyard in Wyoming, abandoned and stripped. Inside, they found a map, similar to the one in the metal box with Blackthorn Ridge circled. Amos was now a person of interest, but he was a ghost, slipping through their fingers. Holt dug into Amos's past. In the 1980s, he'd been linked to a survivalist group called the Ridge Runners, a loose band of loners who lived off the grid in Colorado's mountains. They were known for their paranoia, stockpiling supplies, and avoiding authorities. Locals whispered about darker activities, poaching, theft, even rumors of missing hikers. Had the Kesslers stumbled into their territory? The Polaroid from the metal box, with its two blurry figures, took on new weight. Were they members of the Ridge Runners? A new witness came forward. Sarah Klein, a former resident of Dillon, now in her 60s. In 1992, she'd worked at a diner near Highway 9. She remembered a man matching Amos's description coming in during the blizzard, soaked and agitated. He wasn't alone, Sarah said. There was another guy, younger, with a scar on his cheek. They kept whispering about cleaning up something. I thought they meant snow, but now... Her voice trailed off. Holt showed her the Polaroid. Sarah's eyes widened. That's them, she said, pointing to the blurry figures. I'm sure of it. The younger man was identified as Caleb Voss, a known associate of Amos. In '92, Caleb was 25, a drifter with a rap sheet for petty theft. He'd dropped off the radar after the blizzard, last seen in Montana. Holt issued an alert for both men, but her gut told her the answers were still in Blackthorn Ridge. She organized a wider search, bringing in cadaver dogs and forensic archaeologists. Near Paul, the creek where Ethan's bear was found, the dogs hit on something. Digging revealed a shallow grave, not of bodies, but of more Kessler belongings. Laura's purse, Mark's wallet, and a pair of Emily's glasses, cracked but intact. The items were wrapped in plastic, as if preserved on purpose. Inside Laura's purse was a folded letter, written in her neat cursive. "If you find this, we're in trouble." Mark saw something he shouldn't have. "They won't let us leave." The letter was a bombshell. It confirmed the Kesslers had encountered someone, likely Amos and Caleb, and that their disappearance wasn't accidental. But what had Mark seen? Holt theorized the family had sought shelter in the cabin, only to stumble into something illicit. The Ridge Runners were rumored to have run a small drug operation in the '80s, using remote cabins to store supplies. Had the Kesslers walked into a deal gone wrong? A breakthrough came from an unlikely source, Tom Carver, the hunter whose dog started it all. He returned to the sheriff's office with a new find. Rusty, his dog, had dug up another item near the original clearing, a rusted keychain with a single key and a tag reading BR Storage. Tom had found it 100 yards from where Emily's notebook was uncovered. Holt's team traced the key to a storage unit in Breckenridge, registered under Amos Reed's name in 1993. Inside the unit was a treasure trove of evidence, photos of Blackthorn Ridge, maps with marked locations, and a journal in Amos's handwriting. The journal was cryptic, filled with rambling entries about protecting the ridge and outsiders who don't belong. One entry, dated January 1993, read, "The family's gone. Caleb took care of it. No one will find them." Holt's heart sank. Was this a confession? And where was Caleb now? The journal also mentioned a meeting place deep in the ridge, a cave used by the Ridge Runners. Holt's team located it, a narrow opening hidden by boulders. Inside, they found signs of recent activity, cigarette butts, a modern flashlight, and most chillingly, a child's shoe, size matching Ethan's. Carbon dating suggested the shoe was from the '90s, but the other items were newer, as if someone had returned to the cave recently. As Holt prepared to escalate the search, a call came in. A hiker had spotted a man matching Caleb Voss's description near Blackthorn Ridge, carrying a rifle and acting erratic. Deputies moved in, but the man fled into the woods. The chase was on, but the ridge was vast, and night was falling. Holt knew the truth was close, but it was tangled in a web of lies, buried in a place where the snow never fully melted. A cave in Blackthorn Ridge held the final secrets of the Kesslers' fate. But some truths are too heavy to unearth, even after 25 years. Sheriff Diane Holt stood at the mouth of the cave in Blackthorn Ridge, her breath visible in the frigid air. The chase for Caleb Voss had ended in a dead end. He'd vanished into the wilderness, leaving only footprints that faded into the snow. But the cave, hidden deep in the ridge, was a gold mine of clues. The child's shoe, the modern flashlight, the cigarette butts. They suggested someone had been here recently, guarding secrets from 1992. Holt was determined to find out what happened to the Kessler family, even if it meant facing the darkness head-on. The cave was narrow, its walls slick with ice. Deputies moved slowly, their flashlights casting long shadows. Deeper inside, they found a makeshift camp, a sleeping bag, canned food, and a stack of old clothes. Among them was a jacket with EK stitched inside, Emily Kessler's. Forensic teams bagged everything, but the real find was farther in, a metal lockbox, rusted but intact, hidden behind a pile of rocks. Inside were documents that turned the case upside down. The lockbox contained a stack of letters, written by Laura Kessler. They were addressed to Karen, her sister, but never sent. The first was dated December 22, 1992. Karen, We're in trouble. Mark saw something in the woods. A deal. Men with guns. They followed. Us to a cabin, I don't know if we'll make it. Another, dated a day later, was more desperate. They're keeping us here. Mark tried to fight, but they're too many. Emily and Ethan are so scared. Pray for us. The final letter was a single line. If we don't come back, tell the world what they did. The letters painted a grim picture. The Kesslers had stumbled into a drug deal, likely run by the Ridge Runners, and were taken to the cabin in Blackthorn Ridge. Mark's distress call from Highway 9 wasn't just about the blizzard. It was a cry for help from a threat far more human. But who were they? Amos Reed and Caleb Voss were the prime suspects, but the letters suggested a larger group. Holt's team tracked down the cave's history. In the 80s, it had been a hideout for the Ridge Runners, used to store drugs and weapons. Police raids in 1989 had shut down their operation, but some members, like Amos and Caleb, stayed in the area, living off the grid. The Kessler's Bronco, buried 10 feet deep, suggested a cover-up. Someone had gone to great lengths to hide the family's fate. A tip came in from a hiker who'd seen Caleb Voss in Montana, living under an alias. Holt coordinated with local police, and Caleb was arrested in a rundown motel. Under interrogation, he cracked. It wasn't supposed to happen, he said, his voice hollow. They saw too much. Caleb confessed that he and Amos had been running a small drug stash in Blackthorn Ridge in '92. The Kesslers, stranded by the blizzard, had sought shelter in the cabin, only to witness a deal between Amos, Caleb, and 2 others. Mark, trying to protect his family, had confronted them. Things escalated. Caleb's story was chilling. Amos panicked, he said. He didn't want witnesses. We took them to the cave, told them they'd be safe, but his voice broke. Amos didn't let them leave. He refused to say more, but his confession pointed to murder. Holt pressed for the location of the bodies, but Caleb only shook his head. The Ridge keeps its secrets, he whispered. Amos was still missing, but the cave held one final clue. Deputies found a hidden alcove sealed with stones. Inside were skeletal remains, 4 sets, 2 adults, 2 children. Dental records confirmed they were the Kesslers. The bones showed signs of trauma. Mark had a fractured skull, Laura a broken arm. Emily and Ethan's remains were huddled together, as if they'd been holding each other at the end. The coroner estimated they'd died within days of the blizzard, likely from exposure or violence. The truth was brutal. The Kesslers had been caught in the wrong place at the wrong time, stumbling into a world of paranoia and crime. Amos and Caleb, desperate to protect their operation, had silenced them. The buried Bronco, the scattered belongings, the cryptic notes. They were all part of a cover-up, meant to erase the family from history. But Emily's notebook, Ethan's bear, and Laura's letters had survived, whispering the truth through 25 years of snow. Amos Reed was found a month later, dead in a remote cabin in Idaho, a self-inflicted gunshot wound. A note beside him read, "I didn't mean for it to end like this." The Ridge Runners' legacy was one of violence and secrets, buried in the mountains they'd claimed as their own. The Kessler case was closed, but it left scars. Karen, Laura's sister, visited the cave, laying flowers where her family was. Found. "They deserved better," she said, her voice breaking. The clearing where Tom Carver's dog had dug up Emily's notebook became a memorial, a place where locals left candles and notes. The mountains had given up their secret, but the cost was a truth no one wanted to face. As the snow fell over Blackthorn Ridge, it covered the scars of the past. But some stories, like the Kesslers, refused to stay buried. They flicker in the dark, waiting for someone, or something, to bring them back to the surface. Thanks for sticking with the story until the end. If you enjoyed it, give this a like and share if you haven't already, and subscribe for more.